Hi, sir. Today I'm going to present to you the person and the topic I chose, which is Marie Laveau, and I think she was a witch. So, Marie Laveau was called the Voodoo Queen of New Orleans. She was born in 1801 and died just before her 80th birthday. Um, Laveau was a prominent leader of Voodoo, a countercultural religious movement that allowed her more liberties and powers than the dominant culture did at the time. As a powerful black woman in the 19th century, she inspired many who were against the patriarchal and Eurocentric features of the dominant culture. Being an outspoken black woman was already a radical act, and Laveau made it even more so by becoming a figurehead in a religion that came from Africa. Little historical details are known about Marie Laveau, as her personal life has been mixed with mythical elements even while she was alive. Furthermore, the earliest academic works that were made about her often portrayed her through racist and Christian-centric lenses. Another factor that makes accurate historical research about her difficult is that we're not even certain that her surname really was Laveau. It could have been Leveau or Lafaux or another variation, as it was a very popular name at the time that could be spelled many different ways. And her name, Marie, was also a very popular name in French communities, like the ones in New Orleans. What we do know about her is that she was born of the union between Charles Laveau and Marguerite d'Arcantel, two free persons of colors. Her parents both had black African mothers and white French Canadian fathers. And 6 days after she was born, Marie was baptized at the Roman Catholic Church her family frequented, which Marie eventually became close to the priest who baptized her and attended church every morning of Mass for the rest of her life. Her mother, Marguerite, might have herself have been a voodoo healer, which was also called a root woman. When she was 18, Marie married Jacques Paré, a Haitian refugee. However, their relationship was short-lived and not very happy. They had one daughter together, Marie Evangelie Paré, but she died as a child. And curiously, Laveau always denied that she had a child with Jacques, which is surprising since there are like historical records that she did have a child. And even more curiously, after a single year into their marriage, Jacques disappeared quite suddenly. Obviously, like rumors were abundant, and apparently no one saw him ever again. And during this time, Marie worked as a hairstylist and took appointments in her own house. In 1826, Marie began a relationship with a veteran of the Battle of New Orleans, 12 years her senior, Captain Christophe Glapion. There is little known about the man, but they apparently had a good relationship and stayed together until his death in 1855. While they had 5 biological children together, only 2 girls lived to adulthood. However, Marie was well known as someone who took in homeless children into her home, so her and Christophe might have raised as many as 15 children together. Marie was indeed often described as a very charitable person. She worked as a nurse at Charity Hospital during the yellow fever and the cholera epidemic. She also frequently visited and cooked for death row inmates. She apparently did this well into her old age. Marie retired from her role of voodoo priestess in 1869 and she died in 1881. Interestingly, her 2 surviving daughters took very different routes. Both said they had inherited the gift of spirits from their mother, but only Héloïse chose to succeed her mother as a voodoo priestess, while the other one, Marie Philomène, completely separated herself from voodoo and became a fervent Catholic. So I think it's very interesting that their mother walked both paths, you can say, because she was both a very involved Catholic and also a voodoo priestess. So I think that's interesting. So now I'm going to touch on the mystical aspects of Marie Laveau. I think she could be categorized as an informal religious specialist, as she mostly conducted rituals and used her mystical powers on a need-to basis, not on a calendrical basis. I also believe Marie could be categorized as a witch, because, but according to here's the definition according to Sitki of a witch. A witch is an individual who is believed to possess innate powers to cause harms to persons and property by supernatural means. That's interesting because there are more reports on Mary using her powers for good, so to speak, than to bring harm. For example, she gave amulets to runaway slaves that would protect them and help them cross into Canada successfully. And many patients who had her as a nurse also credited her mystical powers as the reason why they got better. There is one instance when she cursed someone. She had a short-lived rivalry with another voodoo priestess who was becoming more and more popular. And Mary apparently stole from her rival a powerful African doll and used it to bring her to ruin. Sidki, I think, would say Marie had used contagious magic. By harming the doll, she magically cursed her rival at the same time. And unlike many of her followers, Marie was never once arrested for practicing voodoo. It was believed, like people around her believed that it was her power, immense power, that allowed her to escape notice from police. And as Sidki comments that witchcraft is very present in sub-Saharan Africa, especially in the African ethnic group of the Azande. That's also interesting because voodoo itself came from Africa, and there is a big notion in it of the magical powers of certain words, especially of someone's true name. And it was said that part of Mary's power came from her, quote, mastery of the spiritual energy vibrating in oral communication, unquote. And some said that when she would curse someone, she would speak in tongues. And the only thing people around her could understand from it, from like the gibberish, was the victim's name. Sidki briefly talks about the fact that witches sometimes used like potions and like medicine, kind of. And in the documentary, we saw that the first woman who was accused of witchcraft was just like a healer, like she understood like the power of certain plants. And apparently, while she was working with death row like prisoners, she would sometimes, like, she cooked for them notably, and sometimes she would offer them euthanasia, so it would like be a way for them to die more peacefully than by being hanged. And possibly she also gave them tetrodotoxin, which is called zombie poison, which is a poison that that makes you kind of stop being alive for a certain while, like press pause, like your heart is beating like very very faintly. So they would be hanged, they would be like put in the ground, and then a bit later they would wake up and Marie would help them escape. Apparently that's what people say, but who knows what was actually happening. So, in conclusion, Marie Laveau was a well loved and admired witch in her community. She was given the title of Queen of the Voodoo, as she was the high priestess of voodoo in New Orleans and thus their leader. It's very interesting, I think, how the community in New Orleans they were so grateful to her. I found in most accounts, most of them were like really in awe of her presence or charisma. And I think that's very interesting, as we saw in the documentary, and how Sidki like described how people were so afraid of witches, and some people were afraid of her, like mostly people who had crossed her and then like suffered her power. So that's all I have to say about Marie Laveau. Thank you for listening to me.